So good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the official launch of Landscape Partnership Asia, restoring dry land and drought-prone areas. My name is Han Young-ju of the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you here to Seoul. And I extend my warmest welcome to all the online participants around the world. I'm honored to be your MC at this momentous chapter in the history of our region. And before we proceed, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the guests for your presence, both online and offline. We are joined by 4 founding partners of LPA, AFOCO, the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry, and the Global Evergreening Alliance. And we have many more honorable representatives and participants from government officials, the private sector, and international organizations across Asia. Thank you for your participation again, and we ask for your understanding that we are not able to introduce all our guests due to the time constraints. So now, to kick off the opening sessions, I'd like to invite His Excellency Mr. Choi Byung-am, Minister of Korea Forest Service, to make the opening remarks.
네, 여러분 반갑습니다. 이 자리에서 다시 총회에 이어서 이 자리에서 다시 뵙게 돼서 정말 반갑습니다. 산림청장 최병암입니다. 먼저 세계 산림 총회의 주최국을 대표해서 아시아 경관 파트너십 행사에 참여해 주신 모든 분들께 깊이 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 특별히 LPA의 공동 창설자로 오늘 이 자리에 참석해 주신 로버트 나시 C4 사무총장님, 크리스 아미티지 GEA CEO님 반갑습니다. 또한 LPA 공동 창설자이자 론칭 행사 를 준비해 주신 리카르도 깔데론 아포코 사무총장님 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 아침 개막식을 시작으로 해서 제15차 세계산림총회 공식 일정이 시작되었습니다. 이번 총회는 44년 만에 아시아 태평양 지역에서 열리는 전 세계에서 144개국에서 약 12,500여 명이 등록하여 아마 가장 성공적인 총회가 될 것으로 확신합니다. 저는 특히 이번 총회에서 아시아 경관 파트너십이 공식적으로 출범하게 되어 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다. LPA의 발족을 진심으로 축하드립니다. 여기 참석해 주신 여러분, 건조지와 가뭄 취약지는 전 세계 육지 면적의 41%를 차지하고 있으며 그중 90%가 개발도상국에 분포하고 있습니다. 이에 전 세계적으로 이미 본 챌린지, UN 기후행동, UNCCD 건조지, 녹화사업 등 기후변화 대응과 생태계 복원을 위한 움직임이 활발히 일어나고 있습니다. 특히 전 세계 건조지 면적 중 아시아 지역이 약 30%나 차지하고 있습니다. 건조 및 황폐화는 생태계 파괴뿐 아니라 이를 기반으로 살아가는 전 세계 20억 명의 삶의 터전을 앗아갈 위험에 있기 때문에 그 면적이 넓고 가장 취약한 아시아 지역의 건조지 복원은 매우 시급한 문제입니다. 또 이 건조지 녹화는 지구상의 숲의 규모를 키우는 핵심 사업으로서 기후위기, 생태위기, 보건 위기를 극복하는 해법 중에 매우 중요한 사업이기도 합니다. 대한민국은 척박한 환경에서 복원에 성공한 대표적인 나라입니다. 한국 전쟁이 끝난 이후에 1973년부터 지금까지 약 100억 그루가 넘는 나무를 심어서 산림 파괴를 극복하였습니다. 국민 1인당 저희가 한 5천만 명 이상의 인구를 갖고 있는데요. 국민 1인당 약 200그루 이상의 나무를 심은 것입니다. 특히 온 국토에 나무를 심는 운동을 한 70년대의 한국 경제는 1인당 GDP가 500불도 되지 않는 매우 가난한 때였습니다. 기술도 없고 자본도 없는 때에 한국이 산림 녹화의 대표적인 성공국이 된 것은 온 국민의 산림 녹화에 대한 열망과 함께 실제로 남녀노소 할 것 없이 전 국민이 참여한 그런 덕분이라고 생각합니다. 저는 한국의 성공 경험에 비추어 볼 때 그때의 한국보다 훨씬 여건이 좋은 현재의 아시아 국가들이 아시아 건조지 문제도 마음만 먹으면 충분히 극복 가능하리라 믿습니다. 오늘의 기후위기 대응과 사막화 방지 등 국제적인 협력이 매우 중요해진 시점에서 아포코가 건조지 복원을 위한 이니셔티브를 추진하는 것은 매우 시기적절하며 바람직하다고 판단됩니다. 이는 아포코의 설립 목적과도 부합하는 것이라고 생각합니다. 대한민국은 회원국으로서 이에 대한 적극적인 지원을 아끼지 않을 것입니다. 그리고 LPA 사무국을 아포코에 설치하는 것을 논의 중이라고 저는 들었습니다. 아포코는 아시아 지역 열대림 복원 사업에는 이미 많은 경험이 있기 때문에 이러한 노하우를 바탕으로 아시아 건조지 복원 및 지역 주민 지원 사업에도 역량을 발휘해 주시기를 기대합니다. 건조지 녹화는 아시아 지역 산림 분야 이슈 중 가장 중요하고 시급한 과제입니다. 오늘 이 행사를 계기로 아시아 지역이 산림을 복원하고 보호하는 데 적극적으로 주도적인 역할을 할 수 있기를 저는 바랍니다. 특히 건조지 복원을 위한 심도 있는 논의가 오늘 이루어지기를 기대합니다. LPA의 발족을 계기로 아포코와 공동 창설 기관들이 함께 다양한 재원을 발굴하고 적극적인 사업 추진에 앞장서 주시기를 기대합니다. 고맙습니다.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now is the group photo time, so please, could all the speakers please make your way to the front?
there are more degraded drylands in Asia than anywhere else in the world. The continuing degradation of these landscapes has enormous environmental, social, and economic implications. To restore drylands, improve livelihoods, and support national and international goals for sustainable development in the region, we need a targeted initiative at a scale that has never been seen before. Landscape Partnership Asia is that ambitious initiative. It is the largest restoration program across Asia, with the initial aim of restoring 10 million hectares of degraded forests and agricultural lands in Central, East, South, and Southeast Asia by 2032. The partnership is a collaboration initiated by its 4 founders: Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry, and the Global Evergreening Alliance. Jointly with other partners, our efforts will mitigate the impacts of the climate crisis, build the resilience of forests, rangelands, and agricultural landscapes, and improve livelihoods within the next 10 years and beyond. Join us. Together, we can restore drylands and drought-prone areas across Asia for a better future.
I hope you enjoyed the video and got to know more about the LPA. And next, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I invite Dr. Paola Agostini, the lead natural resources specialist with the World Bank, calling in online at a very early hour in Washington, D.C. She'll speak to us on the significance of restoring degraded lands across Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Agostini with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you at the launch of this very important partnership. It's exciting to see the video that you just showed. So thank you very much. You know, I've been working for more than 25 years on landscape restoration, and seeing all this partnership happening, it's really gives a lot of hope. But now let me focus on my presentation to give you a sense of what we are doing in Central Asia. Next slide, please. I was in Tashkent in November in Uzbekistan, and that's what I saw from outside the windows of my hotel. At the beginning, I thought it was fog, and then we went outside and the car were full of dust. This is an event that never happened before in Tashkent, in the capital of Uzbekistan. But it's just that it became evident to everyone in every newspaper, in every television moment, why you need landscape restoration. Next slide. At the same time, just a month ago, in the mountains part of Uzbekistan, you had this kind of event. You know, mud flow, rivers of muds going through every time it rains through these mountains. So next one, next slides. So all in a sudden, really, people are starting to understand that all these disasters have a huge economic impact. This is a studies that we have done at the World Bank that tells you what are the impacts of sand and dust storms in Central Asia, with specific focus on the RLC and linking the effects of the sand and dust storm mainly to the health of the people and to agriculture productivity. So the economic cost in terms of the impact on health, of the impact on agriculture productivity and the impact on infrastructure are really big. Next slide. So this is why we started considering, you know, what's the status of land degradation in Central Asia. And this is on your left is a map of the hotspots of land degradation in Central Asia, that, as you can see, are mainly on the borders of the countries. And we did also trying to understand what's the impact, the economic cost, and the economic of land degradation a few years ago has shown that at least 4% of the GDP of these countries is affected by the cost of inaction. And this is just a very conservative estimate. So next slide. This is why we decided with the World Bank and our Central Asia partners, countries, to focus on corridors in Central Asia, transboundary corridors, because the hotspots of land degradation are on transboundary corridor. Next slide. And here it is, we designed a program called Resilient Landscape Restoration Program that we call in short RESILAND, which covers 4 countries. It's an umbrella program and you have 4 national projects. 2 projects have already been approved by our board, one in Kazakhstan and one in Tajikistan. We are working with Uzbekistan. We should go to the board in May or beginning of June. And Kyrgyz is under preparation. And hopefully in the future, Afghanistan will be able again to join us in the future. We are not doing this by ourselves. We have a lot of partners. This is part of the Bond Challenge, if you want, through the ECA 30 partnership. And I hope very soon also of a landscape partnership for Asia. And it's really sort of incredible to see the commitment of all these countries. But let me give you just an example from Uzbekistan so you understand better the work that we are doing with our partners. Next slide. This is the project development objective of the Uzbekistan projects, but all the countries are very similar with a different entry point. And what I want to say is that the objective, yes, it is to increase the area and the sustainable landscape management, but it's a very, the focus is very much on productive landscape restoration. Restoring the lands, not just for, bringing into a better health, but also to make it more productive, to help both the environmental services, but also the communities and the livelihood of the people that live there. This is why I wanted to open this wonderful picture of all the fruit and the nuts and the pistachio that you can get from Central Asia, which is almost the place of origins of many of the fruits that we eat all over the world. So next slide. This is just an image of Uzbekistan, or on your left, you have the hotspots of land degradation, and on the right, the poverty map. So the project, you have a correlation, if you want, between the degradation and the poverty. And the project that we will implement together with the State Forest Committee of Uzbekistan decided to focus not on the most degraded land, but on the land where you have the most opportunities for restoration. Next slide. So these are the focus area where you have a red diamond all along the borders of Uzbekistan with Kyrgyz, with Tajikistan, with Afghanistan. And maybe once we demonstrate there the impact of landscape restoration that is really going to restore, to heal a very degraded land, then we can expand it to other countries. And you can see in the bottom, I'm particularly proud that we have as a partner working with us, the Korea, the examples of what the Korea Forest Services and Korea has done in terms of restoration has been an eye-opener for me and for many of my colleagues. And so they are helping us, and we have Korea Trust Fund money as well. They are helping us to really work in Uzbekistan. In particular, you will see later with the ICT platforms. But I want to recognize the important role that Korea Forest Services has in this program in Uzbekistan and in Central Asia. Next slide. Those are some of the criteria I was telling you as we selected the project area. So it's really focusing on the highest opportunity for productive restoration. But it also looks at where do you have a protected areas, because the protected areas are like the backbones of where you can produce environmental services. So when you look at the landscape approach, we want to connect different lands, and the protected area is an important core asset in the landscape. And then you connect degraded lands, agricultural land, all into corridors that become our transboundary corridors where we will focus our intervention. Next slide. These are the components of the projects. You always need to have a strong policy component. You cannot, have a policy that goes against landscape restoration or subsidies that favor, a kind of grazing that maybe degrade the land. So a stronger focus on policy, a strong focus on making the State Forest Committee a state-of-the-art organization that can monitor and manage its landscape and its forests, so a strong component on ICT platform, the regional collaboration, because I was telling you the issues are at the borders, and so you have a fire management that needs to be done with protocols that are similar, or you have to manage certain biodiversity that moves along this transboundary corridor together. So this project helps this collaboration among countries. Then we have a second component, which is really the core of the program, which is about restoring in a productive way the landscape, but it's also trying to give to the communities that live around where they are an opportunities to make a livelihood out of the natural resources that are being restored. And so we are trying to make the people to give some training and some small grants, matching grants, so they can become small micro entrepreneurs using the natural resource products. And they can go from beekeeping to capers to pistachio nuts. So instead of only using it for subsistence or for selling it just at the local market, try to make a little bit of a value addition in the jump, and looking at certification and the possibility to even export these wonderful products that Uzbekistan has. And so they will value more their land and their natural resources. And then the third component, it's about protected areas and tourism. Again, as I was telling you, in the design of our corridors, protected areas are a key element because of the environmental services they provide. But ecotourism is an important economic instrument to really value them. And Uzbekistan and Central Asia in general has so much to offer because of the cultural aspects that are present. And so combining the cultural aspects with the ecotourism aspects and the gastronomy that you find in these countries, it's certainly a winning strategy. So this is a little bit about the structure of the program. Next slide. Just to show to you, you cannot, the first thing we're going to do that is to have a forest inventory in Uzbekistan. It's not there, and it's based on the idea that you don't value what you don't measure. The first most important things to do is to know what's there and to keep monitoring it. So forest inventory. Next slide. But the second one, and this slide is taken from the presentation of the Korea Forest Services. So thank you very much. Just to illustrate what an ICT platform can do. It's really to make sure that the Forest Committee becomes a modern, a state-of-the-art organization where all the things are online on the same ICT platform. So we are going to invest together with the Korean trust funds, 2 Korean trust funds that we have, and with the help of the Korea Forest Services into this ICT platform. Thank you so much, Korea, for really bringing your knowledge to Central Asia. Next. These are just the productive component. As you can see, just focusing on introducing certain kind of plantation, a lot of agroforestry, But also because of the desertic nature of Central Asia, we do some water harvesting technique, and then the ecotourism side. Next slide. This is the kind of work we would like to do in protected area. On the right, you see a canyon in Zamin Park, in a beautiful park in Uzbekistan, but at the moment does not have infrastructure to enjoy the park. It has hotels, it has sanatorium, but is missing the trails. So what the project will invest on are these kind of trails that you can see on the left. Next. These are the kind, again, of investment that we do. Next. The key project results. So it's not only about land area and the sustainable landscape management, but it's also about people benefiting. We are going to create programs for jobs, for employment creation in doing this restoration based on the example of a conservation corps that was done many years ago in the US, and the tourism infrastructure that needs to be there. Next. These are the kind of long-term benefits that these programs in Central Asia, this resilient program, will bring. So it's resilience of the landscape, resilience of the infrastructures, and resilience of the people, and the vibrant economy in this region. Last slide. And this is kind of a dream I want to leave you with. So degraded land first, and in 20 years, maybe, or maybe less, a land that is healed, a land that provides a lot of benefits, a land that contributes to the many SDGs that are there. So 3 elements that are important: work on policy, work on partnership, like the ones we are launching today, invest in the natural capital. So these are the key essential elements for any landscape restoration program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Agostini. Now let me invite the founding partners to speak, and we'll go in alphabetical order, starting with the Executive Director of AFOCO, Mr. Ricardo Calderon. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to formally introduce the partnership, the Landscape Partnership Asia. Landscape Partnership Asia is an evolving multi-stakeholder platform that seeks to implement performance-based investments in restoring Asian drylands and drought-prone areas. The partnership will involve a variety of partners, ranging from public through private to civil society. It will seek the commitment of funding from implementing technical and political partners to mobilize resources. Under the LPA, together with our founding partner, the Global Evergreening Alliance, C4ECRAP, APOCO has a dual role of founding partner and secretariat of the partnership. By 2032, LPA envisions to realize the national dryland restoration efforts are substantially enhanced, with large areas brought under integrated dryland and drought management to a minimum of 10 million hectares from the baseline. Training and capacity building at various levels will be the backbone for fostering the achievement of the partnership's vision. Enabling policies will be encouraged where needed to secure investments in restoration. Restoration goals will align with national and international commitments that shall be quantified based on the investment and impact through achievement in land degradation neutrality targets, landscape carbon capture, biodiversity enhancement, bioenergy development, increased nutritious food production, and improved livelihoods. Specifically, the LPA activities are grouped to 6 key areas. 1, establishment of baselines and expansion of the scale of proven restoration approaches. 2nd, training and capacity building. 3rd, expand the scale of financial mechanisms and support to small to medium-sized enterprises. Fourth, operationalization of small grant scheme to assess financial and mainstreaming mechanism. Fifth, support to enabling policy and mainstreaming, and knowledge and management and monitoring and evaluation. Through the LPA, the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, as a formal regional intergovernmental body, is committed to providing the bridge in order to enhance cross-sectoral cooperation, broaden coordination and coherence among member countries, partner countries, and organizations on the sustainable management of forests for the continuous production of economic and ecosystem services, biodiversity conservation, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cordero, for introducing the LPA in details. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Chris Armitage, Chief Executive Officer of the Global Evergreening Alliance, and he will share with us his thoughts on scaling up restoration and uniting diverse sectors. Please give him a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and distinguished guests, I'd like us all to think for a moment about the purpose of the Landscape Partnership Asia: to facilitate the restoration of at least 10 million hectares of degraded land across the drylands and drought-prone areas of Asia by the year 2030. That's an extremely heavy lift, and it's going to require a truly collaborative effort to scale up existing land restoration initiatives. In recent years, we've seen some incredible successes across Asia, but most of the large-scale investments have focused on REDD+, or avoided deforestation and sustainable forest management. By comparison, land restoration projects have been relatively small and fragmented, especially in drylands and drought-prone areas. To deliver the sort of sustainable or transformative impact that vulnerable rural communities require, these scattered pilots need to be scaled up and out, and to contribute meaningfully to mitigating the impacts of climate change, even more so. But scaling up from a land restoration pilot doesn't usually just mean simply doing the same things over a larger area, and certainly not if we want to ensure sustainable, positive change. We need to look at the systems that impact and are impacted by restoration practices, and we need to do this at a landscape level. We need to consider the cultural context across diverse groups, other actors that are impacted, local markets and value chains, opportunity costs and incentives for landholders and land managers, and the policy environment in the interests of government stakeholders, to name just a few. Further, we need to leverage the knowledge and the experience of all key stakeholders, including research and technical organisations, environmental NGOs, and development-focused NGOs, and we need to build on existing trusting relationships and buy-in from communities. If this sounds complex, it's because it is, especially when you consider that most organisations that work with community-driven land restoration compete for the same grant funding on a daily basis. And this is precisely why the Global Evergreening Alliance was created, to coordinate the collaborative design and implementation of massive-scale land restoration programs. And it's why AFOCO, C4ICRAF, and the Global Evergreening Alliance came together as founding members of the LPA, to ensure these efforts are aligned and developed with governments across the region and informed by the most robust scientific evidence. But it goes without saying that large-scale projects require large-scale resources. We've all been hearing for years that we can't rely on grant funding to address global challenges, such as land degradation and climate change. There simply isn't enough public funding to support the scale of action that we need. Instead, I'd suggest that grants should be seen as catalytic funding, used to unlock much larger investments from the private sector. So in recent years, we've significantly changed our focus from raising grant funding to working with the private sector, in particular with large corporate global organisations which have developed strategies for reducing their carbon their carbon footprint and avoiding the emissions to the extent possible, but which also need to offset what can't be avoided or reduced quickly enough. We've analysed the carbon already being sequestered across a diverse range of grant-funded programs and worked together with experienced corporates to develop a robust carbon and financial model, particularly for large-scale private sector investment. But it's worth noting that unlike most carbon models, this isn't designed to maximise carbon. Instead, it's been built around a human development-focused approach that maximises the direct benefits to communities and to the environment. Our land restoration programs are designed with communities to ensure they focus on supporting the adoption of the practices that the landholders actually want, practices that increase the productivity, the reliability and the resilience of their farming systems, and practices that help them participate more equitably in local value chains and markets. And this is important because it ensures ongoing incentives and buy-in from participating landholders, which in turn mitigates risk and ensures the permanence of programs. And these are key considerations for investors. You may have heard an announcement at COP26 about Climate Asset Management's $150 million investment into our Restore Africa program. And that program is being officially launched and starting implementation later this month. But what you may not have heard is that together with AFOCO and C4ICRAF, and in alignment with our new Landscape Partnership Asia, we're working with several large corporates and national governments, and we're well developed in designing a regional $150 million land restoration program called Restore Southeast Asia. I look forward to sharing the details of this landmark program with you in the days and weeks ahead, and to working together to scale up land restoration across the region under the LPA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Armitage, for your wonderful speech. Actually, we're supposed to have another speaker from C4ICRAF, who is Dr. Hovech Nazi, but he is unable to attend today because his other schedule, but he sent us a wonderful wishes and best wishes to us. So please understand. And next, let's now listen to responses from partners and friends who have graced this evening with their presence. Let me introduce Mr. Chris Dickinson, Senior Ecosystem and Ecosystem Services Specialist with the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation of the Green Climate Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Dickinson.
Okay, hello. Distinguished gentlemen and ladies today, thank you for coming. It's great to see so many people from around the Asia region, and I hope that everyone has an interesting and successful World Forestry Congress. And first of all, I'd like to thank AFRICO and the LPA partnership for inviting me to speak today, and just like to make a few comments about the partnership. So first of all, there's been some great presentations so far, and as the previous speakers have said, the dryland forests are very important in the region. It can be one of the solutions for climate change, for land degradation, and for helping with recovery from the COVID pandemic through job creation and income generation. The Green Climate Fund is a very important partner in for countries and private sector in the Asia region. So far globally, we've approved $1.4 billion worth of projects in the forestry and land use area, totaling over $3.2 billion, including the co-finance. And together these will result in over 1 billion tons of CO2 sequestered and benefit 150 million people. There's been some really good projects that have been developed in Asia. For example, there's the GIZ project in Laos, People's Democratic Republic, which is also now looking at developing a second phase. There's the Bhutan Forest for Life project, which is implemented by WWF, which is looking at conservation of upland landscapes to preserve downstream water. There's FAO invested in forests and rangelands in the Kyrgyz Republic, and also a community-based forest management project in Timor-Leste. So, but there's still potential for a lot more, and we'd like to explore in the future how partnerships can be undertaken with the private sector and also the members and countries involved in the Landscape Partnership Asia. Particularly looking forward to trying to develop projects in Central Asia where we don't have many projects at the moment, and it's been recognized by our board as an area where we're under programming. And in some of the dryland projects that we have developed also, like with a lot of political momentum in the Great Green Wall area of Africa, and it would be good if AFRICO and the countries could also stimulate such a sort of political momentum amongst the Asian countries. For example, at the board meeting in this year with GCF approved a project with IFAD, which is working in the Great Green Wall to support agriculture, energy and agroforestry. An important part of this is that it's working with local banks. And this might be something which the partnership can also look at in the future. Local banks will be there forever. They have mechanisms for providing to entrepreneurs, for small landowners, for processing products. The World Bank project had quite a lot of productive value chains in there, which may also benefit from investments in the supply chain. So this might also be a stakeholder to think of in the future. And so we also have sector guides in English, French and Spanish, which have been put on the GCF website, I think this week. The French and Spanish ones will be announced. We have sector guides in agriculture, forestry, land use and ecosystems, which can also help our partners develop projects and concept notes for operation in climate change issues. GCF is also still supporting RED Plus strategies around the world, and this we also see is important for long-term financing, both through RED Plus or through voluntary carbon markets. And we must also emphasize the win-win potential of forests for livelihoods, for downstream water, for ecosystem services, and also for preserving biodiversity. And also, especially in the drought-prone areas where we need perhaps more interventions, and the technical support of partners such as AFRICO and C4 and ECROF will be very helpful in making this partnership really thrive and develop in the future. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming me today. And okay, thank you.
And now let us hear from Dr. Eun-sik Park, Director General of the International Affairs Bureau of the Korea Forest Service. Please give him a big hand.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Eun-sik Park. I'm a Director General of the Korea Forest Service, and also I'm working for the Secretary General for the 15th World Forest Congress Secretariat. I'm very, first of all, on behalf of the Korea Forest Service and Secretariat, thank you very much for you joining us this wonderful Congress, and then with you, the Congress is kind of the very successful Congress, I believe. Thank you. Actually, due to the time constraint, I'd like to skip the most part, but I'd like to share the Korea's experience because you know our previous presenter, the Dr. Agostini, shared some Korea's case. So I think I'd like to provide more opportunity to think about the Korea's story more. This is my presentations, and let me allow to start emphasizing the forest function. So absolutely, the forest is very important resources on the globe to tackle the climate crisis and solve the biodiversity loss and desertification. But unfortunately, forest covers only 31% of the land area. But this is huge, but we can, when we think about the size of the the dry land, which is the 41% of the land area. So it was remarkable because the forest size of the forest land area is smaller than the dry land. As you are well aware, the last year, the more than 141 leaders support the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use to stop the deforestation. I'd like to I share the Korea's forest restoration stories. This is usually I start with my discussion. So can economic growth and environmental improvement go together? The most people say maybe in their mind they have negative answers, but the Korea's story says yes. So I brought two pictures, exactly same place. The left one is the 1950s. Right one is the 2020s, is now. So we call it Cheonggyecheon, small stream running through the downtown area of the Seoul city. Maybe if you go into the Gyeongbok Palace, maybe you can visit this site. The right after the Korean War in 1950s, Korea's economy and the environment were in a state of the extremely devastated. However, within just a half of a century, Korea achieved a dramatic economic growth and environmental recovery at the same time. Maybe you can see some numbers. Maybe as my minister already explained in the opening ceremony, the 1950s, Korea is one of the poorest country. Actually, he said among the 120 member states in FAO, we are the 119. But today we became one member of the OECD members, and also the stand volume per hectare reached to 165. So, yeah, I'd like to explain a little bit about the story. Actually, Korea initiated the National Forest Restoration Project in 1960s by establishing the Korea Forest Service and Forest Law. In particular, by moving and improving the livelihood of the slash and burning farmers, we reduced the deforestation caused by slash and burn and promoted reforestation. Through 6 national forest plan, Korea carried out a successful forest restoration and sustainable forest management, which allowed Korea's citizens to enjoy various benefits of forest now. As you can see, it's not an exaggeration to say that the whole nation, from public-private sector to organize this remarkable achievement. I brought these 3 photos explaining the process of the reforestation. This is the same place, but we started planting trees, and now we have a wonderful forest. According to the studies, the scientists tells there are 4 major driving forces for successful restoration from 1973 to 1987. The first one is the public participation. Actually, you can see the very small girls, they are elementary school students maybe, they were participating in the planting activities, even they are very young, but all Korean citizens join these planting activities. Second, this is national agenda. The reforestation was adopted as a top priority national agenda, and the president emphasized these things many times. So in the picture, the left side one wearing the white caps is the president at the time. So he visited the planting site and then discussed with the expert. Actually, all the guys who holding the shovel is the famous scientist Hyun Shin-gyu. He is the professor of the Seoul National University to develop the new trees. You know, the very good for our weathers or conditions. And third, the policy implementation. As I explained at the time, the Korea Forest Service was established, and then the government introduced many forest protection laws and national forest management plan. Lastly, the economic growth. Economic growth helped this achievement because most people depended on the forest to use the fuel wood, but due to the economic growth, we can replace the fuel wood into the bracket or the coal or the gasoline. So now we have a beautiful forest. The National Institute of Forest Science calculate this value of the ecosystem, and then it is almost the same as the $221 billion US, and we call every Korean citizen owed $4,280 US per year to the forest. Now I'd like to introduce very briefly about the international cooperation of the Forest Service. Absolutely, we have many forest projects with the international cooperation, international organizations and bilateral friends, partners. The first one is we developed the Changwon initiative with the UNCCD. It is aiming to support the effective implementation of the decision of the UN Convention to combat desertification and DLDD. It started from the 2012. It continued up until now. So through these activities, we developed many scientific activities and evidence-based, the achievement systems. So this is one of the very signature programs for the UNCCD. Next one, actually we have 37 bilateral partner countries, maybe many Central Asian countries and Southeastern Asian countries. And I'd like to introduce some of the projects in our bilateral partners. We have excellency from the Mongolian government. Actually, we have very honored to work with the Mongolian government, and then we start this project from 2007, and it is continuing to up until now. So we have 3 phases. So we successfully finished it to a second phase, and this year we start third phase. And this is some photos of the activities in Mongolian project. We call it Greenbelt project. This is another one we are start recently. This is the Saksaur and pistachio plantation project in Tajikistan. Actually, we try to develop the livelihood for the local people. At the same time, maybe we can reforest the devastated area, so people can increase their incomes, and then they also join us to protect the forest. It started 2019, and we will finish it this year, and then we are considering to scale up this project. This is some photos of the project. Thank you very much. Due to the time constraint, I shared very briefly, but if you have any questions or more information, just stay with us, and maybe the Korea Forest Service can provide more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Park Eun-sik. The next talk is from the other representative of the co-host of the Congress, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Mr. Thomas Hofer, Senior Forestry Officer and Team Leader of Forest Resources Management of the Forestry Division. He will now share his insights into the importance of the LPA. Please give him a big hand.
Good evening, colleagues, excellencies, friends. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of that side event for inviting me to be part of this event. And with this, I would like to acknowledge our long-standing collaboration with AFOCO and with the Korea Forest Service. So we have been working together for many years in a very successful way. And thank you so much for all this collaboration, and thank you for inviting me to this event. I was asked to talk about 10 minutes about the importance of national government commitments to restoring land in Asia. Next slide, please. So when I was preparing for, next slide, please. Okay, I can do that myself, sorry. When I was preparing for this talk, I was thinking a little bit, what are these commitments? Why is it important? And here are a few thoughts which obviously can be expanded. And the first thought is obviously that restoration happens on the ground at national level. I mean, we saw this from previous speakers, from the different examples which were shown. So restoration happens on the ground at national level, and that's why national commitment is essential. Restoration requires collaboration across sectors at national level, overcoming administrative boundaries. So that's a very important topic, although we always talk about collaboration, but in practice this is not always easy. So we have to cross administrative boundaries, we have to cross sectorial boundaries, and that needs a strong commitment, because this is not happening by itself. This is really something we have to invest. That's why this commitment is important. The third one is the participation of local stakeholders is essential. So the commitment is not just at national level, but the commitment needs to go all the way through to the local level to be successful with a restoration. Now, the fourth point is very important. Restoration is not something which happens by itself also at the local level, because it needs incentives. Local people, they need to benefit from restoration. If not, they will not necessarily collaborate, because they are struggling with their daily life, so they need benefits for restoration. So that's why that's another element of the national commitment, to really provide incentives. That can be financial incentives, that can be other type of incentives, access to education, to training, or to tools, whatever it is. Restorations need to be prioritized in national strategies, policy, and resource allocations. That's again a fundamental one. Of course, it's good to have projects, extra budgetary funded projects for restoration, but ultimately for the long-term sustainability, restoration needs to be part of national strategies, budget allocations, etc. And finally, the national commitment needs also to go beyond the boundaries. So the collaboration across countries, exchange of experiences and knowledge are important elements. So these are just a few thoughts when we think about commitments, national commitment for restoration, and why they are important. Now, when I was reflecting on this presentation, I was looking at what are, in fact, in Asia, conducive frameworks, and obviously there are these three programs. There are more, but I just wanted to quote, obviously the global one, the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which has a strong relevance for the region. And then in the middle we have the Regional Strategy and Action Plan of Forest and Landscape Restoration in Asia. I will come to that. This is an Asia-Pacific Forestry Commission framework where all Asia-Pacific Forestry member countries have signed, and they are committed. That's again part of the national commitment. And on the right side, obviously, the Landscape Partnership Asia, which is being launched today. I looked also at the institutional framework, and you see here, I should probably mention more. There are all these institutions, and I omitted, I'm sorry for that, the Global Evergreening Alliance here as an institution. But these are all institutions in the region which are, in a way, working on restoration. And most of them, they are driven by member countries. So that means the national commitment is also there in these regional institutions. So if I come very briefly to this regional strategy and action plan of forest and landscape restoration, this is for me a very, very strong framework which countries are committed to. You see that this was launched, or the preparation was launched at the Asia-Pacific Forestry Week in 2016, and then in Sri Lanka at the 27th session of the Asia-Pacific Forestry Commission, the Asia-Pacific Forestry Commission endorsed that document. So this is a document which really calls for national commitment for restoration, obviously with the focus on forests, but much more broadly on landscapes. Let me come for my last quick part to a few elements where FAO is engaged in the region. And the first one I wanted to mention is the Forest and Landscape Restoration Mechanism, which you have heard about already in sessions today during the conference, which is housed by the Forestry Department and which is a program which is funded by a number of institutions, including, by the way, a very, very strong support from the Korea Forest Service, because we have for many years Korea Forest Service is seconding a staff member to FAO's headquarters to work on this FLRM program. So I don't go into detail here. This is a program which obviously is supporting countries in their commitment to the Bond Challenge. It is linked to the Global Partnership on Forest and Landscape Restoration, and it has a strong team at headquarters, but also decentralized. Here in Asia, we have colleagues based in Beijing. These are four main areas of work which FLRM works at country level: improving and integration of forest and landscape restoration policies. The second one is on field implementation. The third one is on financing, scaling up of forest and landscape restoration. So it's facilitating or supporting countries in resource mobilization. You see here Green Climate Fund. We heard about this just by the speaker before, the GEF and other funding resources. And finally, knowledge generation, capacity development, and so on. And all of these activities of FLRM, they are working at national level and are supporting the national commitments to restoration. Let me finish by just giving you just an insight into a few projects which FLRM is working. For example, in Pakistan, this is a GEF6 project. In the Philippines, we work with an IKI funding, German funding, and GEF6. Cambodia, this is Korea Forest Service. In Fiji, we are working with the Green Climate Fund, Vanuatu with the Adaptation Fund, and finally, at the moment, we are developing regional SITS program for the small island development states under the UN Decade for Restoration, and we have a small regional cooperation program of FAO in the regional office working in a number of countries. So this is just to give you a nutshell what is actually ongoing in countries, in this case with a lead from FAO. But again, to say how much actually this has to do with country commitments. And just to close, a few conclusions. In our view, country-level commitment for restoration is essential because that's where restoration has to happen. The programmatic and institutional framework is very conducive, that's what we saw. So both in terms of regional programs, but also of regional institutions which are working on restoration and which are working with countries to support their commitments. It's very, very, very conducive. A large number of completed or ongoing success stories and experience are available. I think that's very important. So we are really, we have a lot of experience now. FAO, I showed you examples, but we heard from colleagues before, other projects. So let's use these experiences which are there. Let's build on them. Let's share the experiences and continue upscaling restoration. And again, this is all finally based on country commitments. And just to conclude, together with many other partners, obviously FAO is fully committed to support country efforts for landscape restoration and to facilitate collaboration across the region. And with this, I thank you for your kind attention and once again for the invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hofer, for the very insightful presentation. And next, let me now welcome Mr. Samuel Lampert, Investment Director of Mirova, to respond to the opportunity presented by Landscape Partnership Asia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person to avoid problems like the mute button. I'm here representing Mirova, which is a private sector investment fund manager committed to valuing, conserving, and enhancing natural capital. Mirova is a B Corp, really focusing on how we can shift the economy to a more sustainable model. And we see enormous value and potential in taking a landscape approach to think around how we can enhance restoration in Asia. We see this because of the way the world is starting to recognize the value of ecosystem services. That is partially through population growth and increased demand for food, for water, for energy, and the need to prevent land degradation, to prevent the loss of productive land. And in terms of thinking about the investable opportunity here, a 2019 report by the OECD estimated that there was about $200 trillion lost as a result of ecosystem due to biodiversity loss. And finally, and increasingly, the private sector is really starting to recognize the value of this and the need to provide more capital into this space. Mirova helps by working with private sector investors to apply environmental and social standards and to support the emergence of innovative new structures to create opportunities for positive impact creation. As of the end of last year, we had about 30 billion euros under management, of which about 10% of that was focused on private assets, that's similar to what we've been discussing today around how we can provide capital into areas such as energy transition, natural capital, and other types of sustainable development goals. We've been active in the carbon markets for over 17 years, starting back working in some of the European markets around the Kyoto protocols. In 2012, we launched the first natural capital fund addressing climate change. In 2015, we partnered with the UN to reach the land degradation neutrality goal. And recently, we've brought new strategies around oceans, around forest, and increasingly around the carbon area. We currently have the Land Degradation Neutrality Fund, which is about $200 million, focused on how we can do sustainable supply chains and land restoration. We have the Sustainable Ocean Fund, which is supporting $130 million for oceans and circular economy types initiatives. And we have a number of incubation funds focusing on the carbon markets through partnerships with L'Oréal, with Orange, and with IUCN. The way we operate is we invest directly to help scale up the supply of high quality compensation neutralization projects around natural climate solutions. We support a critical piece of how we operate is that we support the emergence of high standards for integrity and the governance of carbon credits. We want to make sure, we feel that the need for these standards is critical for the successful development of the carbon markets, and particularly the voluntary carbon markets, as they are essential to avoiding any area of greenwashing and kind of perception that this can be around land grabs, but ensuring that the work is being done in such a way that there are co-benefits with local communities. We are very, very optimistic about this time where we see a huge perception around the private sector interest for investments and the potential for scale. This is driven in part by increasing net zero commitments, where corporates are making carbon neutrality a top commitment, and really focused on reducing their own input footprint and then finding other ways of removing carbon from the atmosphere in order to address their emissions. We also see a demand for locally produced sustainable commodities that have lower environmental impact, that produce social benefits and special forests with a special focus on zero deforestation. So we see this as an incredibly exciting time to be a private sector investor, working into this space and thinking about how we can mobilize significantly more capital. In order for this to work, we have a couple different considerations. First, I think as many of the other speakers have mentioned today, the importance of working on a landscape level that we consider beyond the project scope and ensure that all stakeholders are brought into the process. We see this as essential to establishing the permanence of projects, that by having local support by communities that are living in the forest, that we have an ability to make sure that the efforts will remain and that there won't be kind of slide back over time as a result of deforestation. Because the second element that makes a private sector investment critical here is ensuring that there are significant co-benefits, either to community, to ensure permanence, or to biodiversity or water services or other types of ecosystem products. This is obviously important for the environmental benefit itself, but also we see it as, from an investor perspective, as part of the way of driving higher price premiums and ensuring that investments made today will be able to be sold on markets in the future. Talking to our investors, one of the key considerations is how do we make sure these investments are able to reduce costs and price volatility as their carbon, in order to meet their net zero goals around carbon emissions and carbon reduction standards. A key part of this is ensuring that there is integrity within the whole process. At Morova, we rely very, very heavily on standard bodies, and we strive to make sure that all of our credits are issued through kind of standards such as the gold standards or the Vera standard. That this is in the emergence of these standards and the growth and the widespread adoption of these standards would be critical for us to build contracts that are able to be repeatable, that everybody understands, and that when people understand that when they are making these types of investments in forest restoration, there is a clear understanding of what they are actually making an investment in that is additional and then permanent. There's been enormous good news in the last few years. The market is relatively small, but it has been growing quite quickly. It was estimated to be $1 billion of voluntary carbon credits that were sold last year, an increase of about 10 to 20% on year for the last few years. I think the challenges that remain is that it's still much too small. There's very limited liquidity in the markets. This is partially due to the inherent nature of forest and how long it takes to rebuild forest and degraded land. But the challenge becomes, how do you match the investor expectations of needing to have greater liquidity with the needs of the overall ecosystem, and how do you match those things? And intermediaries like Morova can be really, really effective in this space of matching the denominations in terms of time of the investors to the needs of the underlying projects. Likewise, there's an overall insufficient market size. There's a need to think through how we can divide new and innovative projects that can incubate, scale, and sustain efforts and by doing this, by looking at a variety of different stages in project lifespan, they'll be able to think through different risk reward profiles, which will again be able to attract new investors into the market. And then finally, thinking through how there are ways to make the transactions today, which are incredibly custom for different environments, make them become standardized. Today, the current approach of investing is a very, very time intensive, which adds lots of cost and makes things go much, much slower to where things need to go. And so that we're very excited to be here and to be working with GEA and other partners to support private sector investment at scale in the natural capital space. We, as an international fund manager, are looking for local partners that have strong local networks and relationships with local communities. The Global Evergreen Alliance, for instance, has the expertise in designing business models that enable large-scale restoration programs to restore trees, strengthen ecosystems, improve livelihoods, alleviate poverty, and increase carbon storage. And this is an essential element for us at Morova for thinking through how we can work with local partners. What we're really good at is providing flexible financing options, whether it's debt investments or equity investments or even prepayments for the provision of carbon credits in the future. We're able to de-risk and diversify our portfolio by thinking through a wide range of different actors. And we're able to ensure that there is integrity throughout all of our activities and adherence to international standards, such as the IFC performance standards for environmental, sustainable, social, and governance. But in order to do that, we need to be finding local partners who understand, who have connections to local communities and are able to make sure that these projects are done in a way with buy-in and ownership for all. We can provide opportunities to work with an international supply chain and corporates, make sure that there are acceleration facilities and early stage blended financing. But in order to do that, we need to work with local partners, project developments, public project developers, public institutions, NGOs, to make sure that this ecosystem truly emerges. So thank you all. We're very excited to be here and be working with you to build this coalition of public and private partnerships to enable the scale of regeneration projects and help the voluntary carbon markets grow to make long-lasting investments in natural capital. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel Lamprecht. Now, we are honored to hear from Mr. Dipayan Bhattacharya, Senior Program Advisor with the United Nations World Food Programme.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, distinguished delegates, guests, and my co-presenters. I have not prepared any PowerPoint. My intervention would be fairly short. You know, as World Food Programme, you possibly would be knowing more about our humanitarian work that we are doing globally in different kind of difficult contexts, mostly in fragile conflict and violence affected areas. But also we are working with as many as 80 country governments and various other UN agencies and partners, NGOs, academia, etc., to build their natural resources, to help them and support smallholders, you know, having their ability to produce more, linking them to markets, promoting more and more nutrition sensitive interventions that can not only ensure food security, but also can improve nutritional security, particularly for women and children. We know that food production is possibly the biggest threat to nature. It causes 70% loss of biodiversity. 75% deforestation is as a result of food production and the pressure related to produce sufficient food. You know, 69 or 70% of the water resources are going towards producing food. So when we are supporting smallholders, we really try to keep all these things into mind. And over the past 7 years, World Food Programme have worked with FAO and various other partners, national governments, local governments, NGOs, etc., to rehabilitate more than 800,000 hectares of degraded land by adopting different kind of context-specific technologies and approaches that could be, you know, half moons that you can see, you know, as the background image in the Zoom. We are promoting more and more integrated watershed management practices, adopting different kinds of soil conservation, you know, measures by, you know, through community participation, promoting different kinds of water harvesting practices that also would be mostly following the nature-based solutions rather than leaning towards gray approaches. So we adopt more and more green approaches to build all these different kinds of natural assets. Now, I would like to mention one very important thing, that when we are talking about regreening or reforestation or restoring degraded land in different kind of landscapes, we try to do that through an integrated programming approach so that we don't really focus primarily on one aspect, you know, to regreen or to restore degraded land, but also we look at what holistically we need to bring into a particular community so that these communities would have sustainable livelihoods and they would be not promoting or practicing, exploitative farming practices. And so that is a very critical thing that I would like to bring in here, that let's not just think about one element when we are thinking about reforestation or rehabilitation of degraded land, but it should be part of a larger integrated programming approach. And also to really see how our interventions are really impacting at landscape level. We collaborate with a number of agencies that provide analysis and also satellite images, including NASA. And these images through a before and after analysis over time has really shown significant impact that all these activities are bringing in. And these are not just providing improved livelihoods or providing ecosystem services. What we also have recently measured, for example, in Niger, is that these interventions are also really sequestering significant volumes, millions of metric tons of carbon dioxide. As my last point, I would also like to mention that in Asia particularly, we have now been working in partnership with and with the support from Green Climate Fund, particularly in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia, in Afghanistan, and also in a host of other countries, Philippines, and few other countries. In Bangladesh, also our intervention is very, very interesting. I actually would be presenting that on May 5th in one of your sessions. It's where a sudden influx of refugees completely destroyed the forest cover in a large area, and our work jointly with FAO, IOM, UNHCR, and the national government of Bangladesh, we have managed to restore the green cover significantly through our interventions over the past 3 to 4 years. So we have all these good practices that are available. And I would like to end with a couple of points, maybe something that we really need to discuss with all the key stakeholders who are part of this initiative and beyond, is we need to really keep people at the center of planning by adopting participatory planning approaches, participatory implementation, and monitoring. This is key for success based on the lessons that we have learned from so many countries. Any land rehabilitation efforts, as I mentioned, should be part of an integrated program that would really eventually enhance people's resilience to shocks and stresses. And as a result, what we need is a multi-stakeholder approach so that we bring in what competitive advantages we all have so that there would be multiplier impact at the community level through complementarity, through co-financing, and through different other kind of mechanisms. I would like to really particularly highlight and appreciate the presentation by the World Bank. And since we are actively working with the GCF financing in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, it would be really good to see possible ways of complementarity and partnerships, and also lessons that we can really exchange and learn from each other's experiences. And we look forward to also partnering with the Landscape Partnership Asia initiative. Our presence in Asia Pacific is pretty large. We are almost there in as many as 17 or 18 countries in Asia and Pacific, and also in a number of countries in the Middle East as well. So we look forward to really working together to promote restoration of degraded lands across Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It is now with great pleasure that I invite reactions from the ministers of participating countries. First, we hear from His Excellency Mr. Askarbek Janibekov, Minister of Agriculture, Water Resources, and Regional Development of the Kyrgyz Republic. A simultaneous interpretation will be provided on the channel number 2.
Уважаемые друзья, дамы и
Dear
господа,
friends,
я рад приветствовать вас на этом мероприятии, посвященном вопросу восстановления засушливых земель и районов, подверженных засухе. Площадь Кыргызстана составляет порядка 20 миллионов гектаров, из которых 6% покрыты лесами, то есть 1 200 000 гектаров. В Кыргызской республике сосредоточено богатое разнообразие биологических ресурсов, видов, экосистем и ландшафтов. Почти 90% территории Кыргызстана расположены выше 1000 метров над уровнем моря. Практически 65% населения они проживают в сельской территории, и 35% от общего населения они зависят от лесов, которые расположены в Кыргызстане. В результате инвентаризации лесов Кыргызстана определено, что порядка 13% лесов сегодня деградированы. Лесные ресурсы подвергаются высокому давлению из-за использования в качестве топливной древесины и строительных материалов. Помимо этого давления в связи с растущим воздействием изменения климата на скорость таяния ледников, Кыргызстан, к сожалению, входит в список стран, которые, согласно прогнозам, в наибольшей степени подвержены негативному воздействию и наиболее уязвимы. Я уже говорил об этом, хочу повториться, что согласно расчетов глицологов, скорость таяния ледников, она превышает все прогнозы. Большая часть населения, она зависима от лесов и пастбищ. В качестве средств к существованию жители сельской местности, конечно же, занимаются животноводством. И 49% пастбищ, которые сегодня есть в Кыргызстане, они насчитывают порядка 9 миллионов 40 тысяч гектаров, деградированы. Министерство сельского хозяйства Кыргызстана разработало законопроект, позволяющий трансформировать порядка 500 тысяч гектаров малопродуктивных пастбищ, расположенных именно в засушливых районах, и их использование даст возможность улучшить доходную часть семейного бюджета сотни тысяч жителей Кыргызстана. В новой программе развития Кыргызской республики на 2022 и 2026 годы наше государство заявило о стремлении к сохранению и восстановлению горных лесных экосистем. Необходимо учитывать принцип зеленого роста для пересмотра структуры экономики и перехода к развитию с минимальным воздействием на природную среду. Обязательства в области восстановления лесных ландшафтов и реализация соответствующих мер будут содействовать достижению Кыргызстана своих международных обязательств и трансформации политических обязательств в конкретные действия на местах. В настоящее время мы сотрудничаем с партнерами в области развития лесных экосистем и улучшения пастбищ. Это, конечно же, ФАО, ПРООН, GIZ, КОЙКА, JICA, ИФАТ и Всемирный банк. Я хотел бы, пользуясь случаем, здесь выразить слова благодарности от всего Кыргызстана нашим партнерам за оказываемую поддержку в этих направлениях. Уважаемые партнеры, дорогие друзья, Кыргызская республика заинтересована и гарантирует выполнение взятых на себя обязательств по восстановлению лесных экосистем. А также в этих целях призываем международные организации, финансовые институты и фонды поддержать инициативы и действия по сохранению и восстановлению лесных экосистем нашей республики. Политическое внимание к лесам и принятая декларация лидеров в городе Глазго о лесе и землепользовании на 26-й конференции стран рамочной конвенции ООН об изменении климата обязывает нас предпринимать серьезные шаги по защите и приумножению площадей лесов Кыргызстана. В связи с этим Министерство сельского хозяйства Кыргызской Республики заинтересовано и готово предоставить новые проектные предложения по облеснению засушливых и малопродуктивных территорий нашей страны. Уважаемые коллеги, сегодня на площадке здесь прозвучало, что такое лесное хозяйство. Лесное хозяйство – это климат. Лесное хозяйство – это ледники, леса, здоровье наших сограждан, доходы наших сограждан, экономика страны. Это пастбище, это биоразнообразие и, в конце концов, это туризм. Дорогие друзья, только увеличивая площадь лесов, мы сможем бороться с последствиями изменения климата и улучшения условий жизни наших сограждан. Я призываю вас активнее участвовать в этом процессе, а, уважаемый партнер, я призываю вас активнее нас поддерживать. Большое спасибо.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May we now please hear from Her Excellency, Ms. Aliya Shalavikova, Vice Minister for Ecology, Geology, and Natural Resources of the Republic of Kazakhstan.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants. It's an honor to be here with you, but it's also very difficult to be almost last speaker at this final session today. I will try my best to be brief, but very concrete. In Kazakhstan, as I said already today, we have faced the tragedy of the RLC, and this is the problem that has become not local but global. And now I want to point it pause on several points of the strategy. So the RLC was the fourth largest lake in the world. About 38 species were inhabited in this lake. Were inhabiting in this lake. The population of Saiga was about more than 1 million species, and now we have only part of this lake, which is due to efforts of international organizations and the government of Kazakhstan. So we save the part of this sea, and the level of the water here there now is about 42 meters, and salinity was decreased, and now we can develop fish farming there. So this is one of the efforts that the government of Kazakhstan was already doing. So the main idea now is to decrease the salt desert in this area, and according to the task of the president, we are now planting saxaul in the seabed of this sea, and as I We are about to plant on the area of 100 hectares. Now we are highly support this idea to launch this program on the landscape partnership, Asian landscape partnership for the restoration of drylands and drought-prone areas. What I wanted to highlight is we need some very clear and transparent mechanism how to implement this project. What's the commitment? What will the commitments of both sides, the donors and the recipients? And according to, if we right now or some days later, we can consider and determine the playground playground rules, we can achieve more results, and everyone will know what to do next in order to successfully implement this project. And as a country with a very small area of forest, Kazakhstan is eager to participate in all activities to plant trees, and we hope that today today presented project will be for the well-being of all citizens in the region, in Kazakhstan and in the region. Because, as you know, this is more than a local area tragedy, but regional. So we encourage to actively start this project, and from our side we try our best to do what we have to do, and hopefully by the next not year but next Congress we can show the results of all our activities. Thank you very much.
And thank all our speakers and participants for this wonderful evening. And we are almost at the end of the event. And lastly, as we have prepared some catering service over there, please enjoy freely. And lastly, for the VIP guests in the first and the second row, a glass of champagne will be served by our staffs. And for others, please bring a glass of champagne for toast.